Brett Whitefield, the destinations: Browns, Steelers, Patriots, order of best to worst for Brandon Aiyuk.
Could we throw a fourth team in there? Because as of this morning, it sounds like the Commanders are on that final list now. The fourth team has emerged, which was the team Aiyuk obviously wanted to go to the whole time with the Jaden Daniels connection. So I'll just throw the Commanders in there too. I think best to worst spots for Aiyuk, regardless of what he wants to do, probably Patriots, Browns, Commanders, Steelers. And I'll give you a quick reason why on all of them. Patriots, I think opportunities there. Obviously, they just drafted two guys in Jalen Polk and Javon Baker, but they're really void of talent in a lot of ways, and those guys haven't developed yet. Aiyuk would instantly become the dude. New staff, new regime. They're starting from page one. He'd get to grow with Drake May, the new quarterback there, and be the guy from day one. We're talking about making sure you're getting your money's worth when you give him that new contract. Well, he's instantly a 140 plus target guy in New England. That's easy. That would elevate their entire room. That wasn't quick, like I said it would be. But anyways.
What?
Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.
All right, Brett Whitefield, let's do it. We got some outstanding questions that were sent in for our first ever mailbag here. And one that I really like, and we'll find out for obvious reasons here in a second, comes from Aaron Rodgers, also known as Mikey T. Mikey T says, which quarterbacks are due for regression based on turnover-worthy throws not turning into interceptions and vice versa?
I love this question.
Yes.
So if you just want to go dive into the Fantasy Points data suite, which, by the way, this podcast is powered by the Fantasy Points data suite. You want to go in there and just, sort by turnover-worthy throw rate. You'll see there's a couple QBs who stick out. I think there's two candidates for me, or actually probably three, Joe. I don't know where you're going to go with this, but CJ Stroud, Brock Purdy, Will Levis. Those are the three where I'm like, they definitely got some turnover luck. And I know, I really want to get into CJ Stroud because I want to hear your thoughts, but I know it's sacrilegious at this point to speak bad things about CJ Stroud because he was crowned as the next GOAT last year. He played great, exceeded expectations. However, there were some blemishes. So I do think he's probably my number one candidate.
I think you brought up the right three names to correlate between, hey, you put the ball in harm's way a lot and you just got lucky. They didn't pick it off. I think those are the right three names. What's interesting about two of them is they are rookies, right? Like CJ Stroud and Will Levis were rookies last year, and they got away with a lot. And I think their interception totals will come up. Perhaps I think for CJ Stroud, I think he could double his interceptions. He threw 5 last year. I think that could be 11, 12 easily. And that's not even a ton of interceptions. It's just not going to be that low. The player that's fascinating is the one I didn't mention yet, and that's Brock Purdy, where the sample size is a little bigger, man. And the more I watch Brock Purdy, the more I'm like, I guess he's just going to keep getting away with it. I guess it's just always going to work out because it just does. And the process is not as good as the results a lot of time, but for how long is this going to continue before we're like, I don't know. I think he's something, there's something there. I don't have any like magical words to say other than the sample size keeps growing and he keeps getting away with it.
So the Purdy thing is really interesting because, for one, you go watch his college tape, Joe. He had great moments in college for sure, but the guy was pretty reckless with the football. He once threw an interception that was caught 15 yards behind the line of scrimmage. How on earth does that happen? Like, that's scrambling around, trying to do crazy things. Obviously trusts his arm more than maybe he should. Like you said, the results have been better than the process. But the flip side of this is like, so we know that's in his DNA, right? And he's put that tape out in the NFL as well. It just hasn't cost him yet. But what if they do lose Brandon Aiyuk? And we're going to get to, there's several Brandon Aiyuk questions in here, I think. So we'll get to Aiyuk specifically. But as it pertains to Brock Purdy, I think that could be pretty big for him and maybe turning that luck back towards average because Aiyuk has bailed Purdy out of a lot of interesting situations where he's chucking up a YOLO ball and Aiyuk has gone up and got it. I think the Lions NFC Championship game against the Detroit Lions where
100%.
that hit Kindle Vildor in the face mask, and then that turns into like a 45-yard play that gets down on the 1 yard line. That should have been an interception.
All right, Brett, let's get into a player here that I think we see differently, and that's Zamir White. This question comes courtesy of Obsession NFL, who says, what is the ceiling for Las Vegas Raiders running back Zamir White? I legit see him as a high-end RB2 if all goes well. Could it be, or am I getting delusional?
To me, so obviously this is a question geared towards fantasy football. Just full disclosure, Joe and I aren't fantasy guys, but we do have our pulse on the NFL, so we can give you really good insight into that. A high-end RB2 to me, gosh, I don't know that he can get there personally. If that's the baseline, I think he's probably a low-end RB2, maybe high-end RB3, but like what do you think his statistical ceiling is, Joe? I'm thinking like 1,000 yards rushing, 6-7 TDs, not a lot of activity in the passing game. That would make him like a low-end RB2. If you agree with those statements.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable projection. First of all, let me declare that I am a dynasty owner of Zamir White. I had him on my taxi squad for like 2 years, and now the greatest reward in the history of having a taxi squad is now the guy that you stash is the feature back for the Las Vegas Raiders, which was nice because I did have Josh Jacobs as well. So it was like, have your cake and eat it too. And so Zamir White, I think where I draw a lot of optimism for him this coming season is how he finished last year. He kind of had an opportunity to be the guy over the last 4 games of the season. And he was very productive. He had a lot of touches. 17 for 69 and a touchdown, 22 for $145, 20 for 71, 25 for $112. That was all there. Now, the receiving production wasn't huge. He did have 5 catches in the week 16 game against Indy on 6 targets. And, he got a decent amount of opportunity to catch the football, but I don't know that that's going to be a strength. But this is a Raiders team that we know wants to run the football, right? Like that's their bread and butter. We've heard Antonio Pierce talk about this, and the Raiders are going to be at their best when they can lean on their rushing offense. And Josh Jacobs isn't around. And the only meaningful, quote unquote, meaningful thing that the Raiders did at the running back position was sign Alexander Mattison, who stinks out loud. And so I'm pretty high on the opportunity that's going to exist for Zamir White. And that matters a ton when it comes to fantasy. Like, you have opportunity, that's how you get stats. And I think he's going to get a lot of touches. That puts him north of 1,000 rushing yards, modest receiving production. But I think a reasonable RB2 is what Zamir White can be. And I think he's going to get a lot of touches. And I certainly think he's going to get the goal line carries. I think there's a lot to like about Zamir White in fantasy this year.
So the Madison point, I actually think this is more significant against Zamir White than you think. Like, I think Madison's he's an established running back in the NFL. He had more carries last year than Zamir White. I don't know that he stinks. The Minnesota offensive line's been terrible in the run game for about 3 years. Like, Dalvin Cook's last year they were awful even.
And Dalvin Cook's also was awful as last year. Look at how much better Ty Chandler was behind that offensive line.
Yeah, Ty Chandler's more of a scheme fit though. Like, they're back to, like, with Kevin O'Connell in the fold, they literally are just an outside zone team. They run a power occasionally, but they're outside zone heavy. Alexander Madison's not an outside zone runner. He much better fits what the Las Vegas Raiders do from a run scheme perspective. And I look at like his advanced metrics. He forced missed tackles at double the rate Zamir White did last year. Double the rate. I mean, yards after contact per carry are also very similar. Madison is a physical bowling ball type runner, similar to Zamir White. And I'm not saying Madison's going to have this great season. I just think I think people think there's this run heavy team in the Raiders, and Zamir White now is the guy who gets all of like the 90% of the workload. I think it's going to be more 70-30 probably. And then to make matters worse, Madison's probably a better receiver than White, better catching the football. And they have Dylan Laube and Amir Abdullah, who have both carved out roles as pass catchers, in their collegiate and then now NFL career with Amir Abdullah. So I don't think this is as clean of an opportunity for Zamir White as a lot of people think personally. Especially like what we know about the player. Like, he wasn't a very good player in college. I didn't think he had high pedigree coming out. There's a reason, he was drafted where he was. And then to make matters worse, I just think they've added 2 running backs. I don't know. I'm just a little less bullish on Zamir White. I do think he is the starter. He'll get a big chunk of the workload there. I just think, the efficiency plus the addition of Madison is going to hurt him a little bit, personally.
All right, I like this one. This next one here from Jamie. Are the Steelers a bigger threat with Russell Wilson or Justin Fields as the starting quarterback?
Woof. Very similar players in some ways and very different players in other ways, right? So I think when you look at 2 guys that have no ability to functionally keep an offense in rhythm, to run pass plays as they're designed and hit your first read, hit that back foot, let the ball rip. These are not guys that do that. These are both guys that invite chaos into their life. I think Russell Wilson's tape the last 2 years, though, has been so bad that I'm actually going to say Justin Fields here. Justin Fields still has the youth on his side. He's still a dynamic runner. He brings the offense a certain floor because of that running ability. We know Arthur Smith, has favored mobile quarterbacks as well. Not that he ever used them correctly necessarily, but I think maybe he gets the most out of Justin Fields here, where I think Russell would be really tough for him. Like, think about all the boot action stuff Arthur Smith likes to do. You think Russell Wilson's running those concepts at a high level? No.
Not at all. I first off want to say that it's important to acknowledge that Pittsburgh was a playoff team last year, and it had nothing to do with quarterback play, right? It was in spite of quarterback play, rolling through Kenny Pickett and Mitch Trubisky and Mason Rudolph. And I think Mason Rudolph had a couple of good starts later in the season, but it wasn't because these quarterbacks were the catalyst. And so I think that should give Steelers fans some optimism. I can't do Russ Wilson, man. I can't do it. I think it's fair to say that both of these guys don't run the offense, and that's a problem. But I think that Fields is more dynamic right now because I think his rushing ability is just better. And he has a little bit more appetite for risk, and I think that's a good thing because Russ is the type of quarterback that's going to run the ball out of bounds and take a loss before he just throws the ball away because he cares about things like passer rating. I can't do it, man. I can't do it. And so give me Fields as a guy that's going to put it out there a little bit more. He has more physical gifts. He's bigger, has more arm talent, he's a better runner. So I think they're a bigger threat with Justin Fields. Although, for kind of back to my opening point here, if the idea for the Steelers is to play good defense, run the football, and then your quarterback not hurt you, then that's your case for Russ Wilson. I just can't do it.
That's a good point. I think something that you said in there, it's made something click in my brain. So these are both guys that invite a lot of chaos into your life. So if you're going to invite that chaos, there has to be a certain prospect of payoff, right? And with Russell Wilson, I'm not sure what that payoff is on any given play. Like we know he's not going to break a 40-yard run.
No.
Where Justin Fields, like, you got a lot of outs if you're going to invite that chaos. He can break several tackles in the backfield and move the chains with his legs rather easily. And then also does throw a really nice deep ball. And you got a guy like George Pickens on your team, Roman Wilson, who can go get it. I'm just wondering, Fields, even though he's going to invite that chaos, I think the prospect of payoff on a per play basis is much higher with Fields. He's going to connect on some of those deep balls. He's going to make things happen with his legs. Protecting your offense with defense and running the football stuff, I kind of think that favors Fields still, man, because like you can build in quarterback run into that scheme now. You can tag read option on everything. You can run QB power down on the goal line. Like you can move those chains with Fields as a runner, and you're not going to require him to do as much with his arm. Where Russell, I don't think he's got it left in the legs. I think that part of his game is passed him up.
So we are all in on Fields and him being the starting quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers. All right, Bright Whitefield, let's talk a little Brandon Aiyuk. And we get this question courtesy of Bub, who says, with all the rumblings about an Aiyuk trade, rank the 3 landing spots, the Browns, Steelers, Patriots, in order from best to worst. And of course, this comes, you should know as the listener that we are answering this question. We're recording this podcast on Wednesday morning. So if Brandon Aiyuk gets traded between now and the time that you listen to it, that's okay. You know the answer, but we still want to attack this through the lens of, all right, these are the destinations, knowing now that the Patriots are out because, Brandon Aiyuk doesn't want to play for him, which is totally understandable. But we could still factor them into this equation. Brett Whitefield, the destinations, Browns, Steelers, Patriots, order of best to worst for Brandon Aiyuk.
Should we throw a fourth team in there? Because as of this morning, it sounds like the Commanders are on that final list now. The fourth team has emerged, which was the team Aiyuk obviously wanted to go to the whole time with the Jaden Daniels connection. So I'll just throw the Commanders in there too. I think best to worst spots for Aiyuk, regardless of what he wants to do, probably Patriots, Browns, Commanders, Steelers. And I'll give you a quick reason why on all of them. Patriots, I think opportunities there. Obviously, they just drafted two guys in Jalen Polk and Javon Baker, but they're really void of talent in a lot of ways, and those guys haven't developed yet. Aiyuk would instantly become the dude. New staff, new regime. They're starting from page one. He'd get to grow with Drake May, the new quarterback there, and be the guy from day one. We're talking about making sure you're getting your money's worth when you give him that new contract. Well, he's instantly a 140 plus target guy in New England. That's easy. That would elevate their entire room. That wasn't quick, like I said it would be. But anyways, Cleveland, I think they're a very good football team, and he's playing in that Kyle Shanahan offense. Kevin Stefanski basically runs an iteration of it. I think nomenclature-wise, that'd be a really easy swap, right? Aiyuk goes into Cleveland. Now, it sounds like if that were to be a deal, Amari Cooper would actually be going to San Fran. So, again, another great situation for target volume, right? And that's what Aiyuk wants. He wants to prove he's the guy. So he goes into Cleveland. If Amari Cooper is part of that deal in return, then he's probably the de facto one. I know Jerry Jeudy just got paid, but I don't think he's getting paid that much. And I think you'd have a clear 1 and 2 there. And then I mentioned the Commanders. I like this fit, obviously teaming up with the college quarterback he played with, but Terry McLaurin is a pretty good player. You like Jahan Dotson. I think there's more competition for targets there with a young quarterback who, likes to run a lot. I'm just not sure the opportunity is what Aiyuk thinks it would be. And then Steelers, that's just a dumpster fire offense right now. We know Arthur Smith doesn't know how to use his weapons correctly. We just broke down the quarterback situation for you. So
yeah,
I think that'd be last place for me. What say you?
Well, I think it's through the lens of the opportunity for Aiyuk to be the guy and command a lot of volume. I think you have it in the appropriate order. And I would argue that all of those teams could use Aiyuk, right? This is the right mix of teams that should be in on this. I think the Chargers should be in on this, but
Agreed.
they don't seem to be. So I think if they were a candidate here, I'd be like, get that done immediately. And you'd have to think, like, if he does go to the Commanders, Jahan Dotson goes to the 49ers. That's what's complicating with this entire conversation is the 49ers have a great opportunity to win the Super Bowl this year. And trading away Brandon Aiyuk doesn't help with that. And so you need meaningful pieces back that are going to help you win the Super Bowl. It's like, great, I get a first-round pick in 2025. I don't care about that. Right. I need help right now. And that's what makes this complicated. I mean, of course, it's always complicated when you're going to trade a player. You have to give up assets, and you have to also figure out a long-term extension with that player. But it's even more complicated because the 49ers, it's not just draft picks. You need to get players back. So I like the order that you put them. The Commanders are interesting because if he does want to be the number one guy, obviously Terry McLaurin is there, and that makes it a little more complicated. But I think it says something. If that's where he wants to be, that's pretty appealing to me as well. I'm not going to be upset if I have Brandon Aiyuk and Terry McLaurin for Jaden Daniels.
Oh, for sure.
Right? That gets us into the Caleb Williams conversation of, wow, look at these great players that are around him. Now, the problem with the Commanders is their offensive line is terrible.
Yes.
Like it's an unserious position group. And I think that puts a wet blanket over every idea that we could have for the Washington Commanders and their offense, especially with Jaden Daniels and his makeup and, what the curve is going to be for him with Cliff Kingsbury. But I like the order that you had him, man. I'm not going to lie. I think you had it the right way. I
like your point about, where he wants to go is probably the best fit. That's probably true. It's the Chargers. The more you said the Chargers and it instantly sparked, like they should be in this. Why aren't they in this? Is it because they can't pay him? Is that because they just dealt Mike Williams and Keenan Allen to free up salary cap? Is that an issue, you think?
Maybe so. I think obviously the quarterback situation is the best to me with the Chargers. And for whatever you think about the cast of characters around Herbert, none of them are Aiyuk. I think Aiyuk's the kind of guy that I think is a legit number one receiver in today's NFL.
I think
Gets open,
top,
makes plays at all three levels.
I think he's a top 6 to 8 wide receiver.
Yeah, he's
phenomenal. Yeah.
There's nothing light about this type of addition. So
yeah.
A lot of I mean, the combination of having the cap space, the opportunity, the compensation ability, it's all, it limits the pool, but we're not talking about small stuff at receiver here in Aiyuk.
For one other angle we could go here too. For a team like, say, the Cleveland Browns, who are every bit in the playoff mix, they think they're ready to go compete for a Super Bowl, right?
Yeah.
The longer this drags out into training camp, doesn't it start to shut that window, right? Especially if you're dealing a guy like Amari Cooper, if he's part of the deal, you're basically saying goodbye to your wide receiver one, and then also admitting we have 3 weeks to get this guy ready for the season. And I know he knows the playbook kind of, because Stefanski, there's that overlap in nomenclature, yada, yada. But at some point though, right, time becomes an issue, right, in making a deal like that for a team like Cleveland.
No doubt. Yeah, you want to get time on task and reps and chemistry built, and that's difficult. And I love Amari Cooper. I'm not saying the Browns shouldn't be in, but like you have, to me, they have the least amount of urgency to do this, because they have Cooper and Judy and Elijah Moore and David Njoku. Like we're not struggling here. Like maybe your best opportunity this year is to kind of stick with what you have and the players that have been working together all year long to this point. Yep. So, all right, fun conversation. We'll see what happens. Something's going to happen. And I still think that, the 49ers have a ton of cap space right now. I know there's a lot of decisions to be made, but Brandon Aiyuk would probably be part of my plan. Like, yeah, I'd probably I'd make concessions elsewhere. I'd want to have Aiyuk. I really would. So I
agree. I think it's a math game. Like Aiyuk is capable of being a target hog, and he's never been asked to be a target hog. So I think he wants to get paid like he's a target hog, but they're like, bro, you catch 60 passes a year. Like what?
Trade Debo.
I agree with that.
Why are we not trading Debo?
When they drafted Ricky Pearsall, I thought it was to trade Debo, because Pearsall, he has overlap with both guys. Actually, I wrote that in my scouting profile and my prospect guide, if you go to fantasypoints.com and check that out. So I did write that he has overlap with both players, but more overlap with Debo, where he was a short area player a lot of his college career, a lot of screen usage, jet sweeps. Now, he's not as dynamic as Debo as that goes, but he's also probably a better route runner than Debo. He's better at beating man coverage than Debo. So, yeah, trade Debo, roll with Aiyuk and Pearsall, and I think you'd have a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm down for that. All right, this one comes from Seish, and I hope I said your name correctly. If I remember correctly, you were high on Puka. I think that's maybe you, Brett Whitefield.
Yes, sir.
What late round sleeper is worth a second this year in Dynasty, which might look like an overpay today, but will be worth it after the season?
Yeah, so I was high on Puka. I had a second round grade on him coming into the draft. He goes day 3, blows up. Rest is history. The thing is, I didn't like, as much as I liked this receiver class, most of the guys I like did go day 1, day 2. So I don't think there's for one, finding another Puka is hard in of itself. Mm-hmm. So I'll throw a name at you that I think is in consideration. I know Joe has a guy. I'll throw out Brendan Rice, who is not your guy, right, Joe?
Not my guy.
Brendan Rice, the Chargers, I thought the tape was much better than the 6th round, grade he got. He's a big body guy who has phenomenal route running tendencies. That offense at USC also really did not play to his strengths. Like, this is a prototype X receiver who most of the things he does well are scheduled routes, like timing, rhythm. He's going to run a really nice slant, a really nice dig over the middle. He can win 50-50 balls, go balls down the field, but that's not really his thing. He's more of a crispy, big framed route runner that you kind of want to get involved as your X. Obviously, Caleb Williams didn't really run the offense that way. So I think he probably has a little more value. Now, listen, though, I'm not advising you to draft him with a 2nd round pick in Dynasty. I don't think you, maybe 4th round pick in Dynasty.
When do you think 2nd round, 2nd round rookie draft? That's got to be what we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So I would say 4th round rookie there. I don't know that there is. I think Joe's guy is probably the 2nd rounder you want to go with, and I'll just throw it to you, Joe.
Yeah, I went with Javon Baker, which I guess is a buzzy name. But I like Javon Baker back when I watched him this winter to study him for the draft. So I really like him. And he's certainly made headlines with, the way he feels about where he was drafted. And he certainly made some big plays in training camp. But the opportunity is pretty wide open for the Patriots for someone to emerge as a high volume target getter. And I just like so much of Javon Baker's game, and I think he's wired a certain way that inspires me. I think he meshes well with either Jacoby Brissett or Drake May whenever it becomes his opportunity. And I know that Jalen Polk was the 2nd round pick, and that's not nothing, but I'm just keeping an eye on Baker as kind of the player that emerges here. So he's my late round guy, if you will, to emerge at wide receiver.
Well, if we're being honest too, Javon Baker, like there's room for both Baker and Polk to be good because there's no one in that offense.
Yeah,
currently.
who's it going to Pop Douglas or like
right?
Yeah,
like both those guys.
Tyquan Thornton,
Yeah, no
KJ Osborne.
yeah.